Hi there, I'm back. Actually, I didn't go very far after the first lecture. I'm just continuing. But anyway, this is DAAC 1311, Counseling Theories, and we're going to do Chapter 2 out of the book, Theory and Practice of Counseling and Psychotherapy by Gerald Corey. And I've got a slideshow presentation to share with you, and we'll discuss some of the things in the book. Then we'll take a look at the Scope of Practice website today. And so without further ado, I will share my screen with you and we'll take off from there. And let me get over here. I'm going to be switching from the slideshow to the textbook, so I don't know how that's going to work out just yet. We're going to see here in a minute. But before we go in that direction, we're going to go in this one. And this is to the scope of practice. I want to discuss a couple of things regarding the scope of practice before we get too far into anything. And remember that I said early on that we'll be looking at these theories, but we'll be thinking about how they'd be applied to the practice of substance abuse counseling, and how they'd be applied working with people in treating who have substance use disorders and with treating those substance use disorders. In doing that, we'll be also providing services to their family members. We'll be providing services to the public at large regarding education and what have you. So there's a lot of things that we'll be doing that are covered under the scope of practice. But these are some guidelines that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. So let me go over to that right away. And this is the Texas Health and Human Services webpage and the Licensed Chemical Dependency Counselor Program. And there's tons of information on here. I'm going to post this link in your course room so that you can access it. And you can wander around on it at your leisure. Here's a bunch of things here that might be interest to you. But here's what is of interest to me right now at this moment, and this is the scope of practice. So I went to the web page, went to the scope of practice, clicked on the scope of practice, and there I am. A licensed chemical dependency counselor is licensed to provide chemical dependency counseling services involving the application of principles, methods, and procedures of the chemical dependency profession as defined by the profession's ethical standards and the knowledge, skills, and abilities as defined by Rule N25 TAAC Chapter 441, General Provisions, and this is Texas Code. The license does not qualify a person to provide services outside the scope of practice. As I noted before, and will note again, we are limited in the scope of what we can do. We are a narrow-focused profession that's basically treating substance abuse and related disorders. The scope of practice for the chemical dependency counselor includes services that address substance abuse dependence and or its impact on the service recipient subject to the following. And these are the limitations. The counselor is prohibited from using techniques that exceed his or her professional competence. You have to have the educational credentials in order to do certain things. We do not diagnose outside the substance use realm, nor do we provide services outside the substance use realm with techniques that we haven't been trained and credentialed in. The service recipient can only be the user, family member, or any other person involved in a significant relationship with an active user. And that sounds limiting, but it's really not, if you think about it. LCDCs can diagnose substance use disorders, but anything other than a mental health diagnostic impression must be determined by a qualified professional. A diagnostic impression is something that I can write about the client. And I might say something along the lines of my diagnostic impression if I'm moving it forward to my clinical director, for instance, that rule out schizophrenia because da-da-da-da-da, or client describes these issues, rule out bipolar 1, you know. And then I just kind of kick it down the field to the qualified therapist or the qualified physician who will make the diagnosis if they want to do it. LCDCs are not qualified to treat people with a mental health disorder or provide family counseling to people whose presenting problems do not include chemical dependency. And this is really, you know, I have seen people get a little full of themselves and want to be treating all kinds of things and diagnosing all kinds of things, but that's not ours. It's not ours to do. If you want to do that, you need to go further with your education, get some more letters behind your name, take your credentialing examinations, and get your license as an LPC or as an LMSW or whatever. So the practice of chemical dependency counseling services is defined by rule as providing or offering to provide chemical dependency counseling services involving the application of the principles, methods, procedures of the chemical dependency counseling profession as defined by the activities listed in the domains of TAP 21, addiction counseling competencies, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of professional practice published by the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment. And you'll be perusing TAP 21 a little later on in another course, so don't worry too much about that now. But just consider this as we're moving forward through the I'll spit it out here in a moment. As we're moving forward through the course, that's what we'll be doing, and keep it focused on that. Corey notes that the authentic self is the best thing we have to offer. The most effective instrument we have for change is us. We talked about that just a little while ago. But it's important because if we're hiding behind whatever role it is we're hiding behind, the client will hide also. So if we're assuming, and this is something that you'll talk about in counseling skills and some other courses as well, that you want to avoid adversarial relationships, and you want to avoid relationships that are phony, that are manipulative, etc. Because it doesn't get us anywhere if we're arguing with people and butting heads all the time. Then the outcome, the importance of the outcome becomes, who wins, and it's not about winning. So we want to be as upfront, as open, and genuine as we possibly can. We want to model self-disclosure so that the client can model it too. Model honesty and openness so that the client can model it too. Self-reflection and authenticity is and should be a daily practice of the substance abuse counselor. We should be considering who we are, why we're doing what we're doing, what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, what we hope to gain, etc., and so forth. We'll have an opportunity to do that because all of our encounters with others in the counseling work leads us to encounters with ourselves anyway. So we just ought to go ahead and have that encounter rather than try to avoid it. Don't you think? So what does a good counselor look like? I used to, oh boy, that's tragically hard to see, isn't it? I didn't notice that when I put the PowerPoint together. Good counselors are open. We bring our realness, our genuineness to the table. We're honest in our disclosures. These are things that I got from students mostly. I'd ask them, what do you think you need to be a good counselor? And these are some of the things that they answered to me. But we also need to be patient. Sometimes counseling is slow work. Sometimes, it's not a smooth 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 thing. And we take a few steps forward and a few steps back. Many of our clients, guys, are going to be people who come in with a substance use disorder, but you're going to find out they've got a lot of PTSD going on in their lives because of the lifestyle that we lead. People who overdose, people who have committed crimes, sometimes violent crimes, people who've had violent crimes committed against them. And I don't know, just in general, how many people running around out there know someone who's been a murderer, but I've known a number. I don't know out there how many people know someone who's been murdered, but I know a number. People who the lifestyle puts you in positions where you're abused, where you're doing abuse. And when you're working with people who have those types of issues in their background, you have to be patient because it's not a fast process. We have to be supportive. I was surprised the first time a client said a student said you have to be manipulative. But, and that was a very long time ago. But, the truth is you do, sort of. And we'll talk about that in terms of practice a number of times before we get out of here. I remember reading an article back years ago when I was an undergrad, and the author of the article basically just came out and said all human communication is manipulation. Every damn bit of it. There is no communication that we do with anyone or that we're ever involved in that doesn't have a level of manipulation on it. Right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm providing information or point of view or perspective. And do I have an agenda in prescribing it? Yeah, I absolutely do. I'm trying to convince you to accept my arguments, my presentation as factual, to incorporate them into your practices as you move out of here, things like that. If I say to my grandson, would you please shut the door? That's manipulation. I'm trying to get him to do something. So manipulation is a loaded word, but it's not always a bad word. And we'll talk about that later on too. If I provide you with choices in a counseling setting, the way I provide the choices can be a manipulation. And I can move you towards choosing the choice that I want you to choose and, and still feel like an exercise in free will to you. So, we'll talk about that later. Is a good counselor confrontive? Sometimes they are. I mentioned in the last lecture that confrontation is an over-relied on skill sometimes, especially in the substance use treatment field. We don't have to be confrontive. We don't have to be in people's faces. We don't have to have that tough facade. And we'll, later on, in other classes, we'll talk about the types of confrontations that people can use and when they should use them and how they should be used and what the outcomes should be that we're looking for. You can confront people without being rude or nasty or whatever. A confrontation can be an invitation, inviting someone to look at something, what have you. And to also be aware that we're models. Whether we want to be models or whether we don't want to be models, we are. We can't get around that. I'm going to switch here for a moment and go over here to the Vital Source, book source, and share this with you. This is in chapter 2 of your text. What kind of person can make a significant difference in the lives of others? What types of qualities do effective counselors have to have? And one of them is have an identity. We know who we are, what we're capable of becoming, what we want out of life, and what's essential. What's real, and essentialism is really the study of what's necessary. Sometimes we confuse what's desirable with what's essential. You'll probably know that already. But knowing what's important and knowing ourselves, knowing what we want, why we're doing what we're doing, etc. Effective therapists respect and appreciate themselves, so that I value myself, not in a egotistical type of way, but I realize that I'm worth something and that what I have to offer is worth something and that I can be a source of support and strength for other people. I have a tough time with this when effective therapists are open to change. Yeah, well, sure. After I, resist it and cry about it, and, raise hell, and I'm not going to do that, and all this kind of stuff. But change is inevitable. Every day we become someone different than we were yesterday in a real sense, So embracing change and is a less painful way of going through life because things do change, honest. Effective therapists make choices that are life-oriented. We're aware that we've made some bad ones, and one of the best ways of learning to be a good chooser is to make a boatload of bad choices and learn from them, so that learning from the mistakes that other people make. We don't have to make them ourselves. One of my early sponsors, Buzz, back in California, where I sobered up, said that he said I'm telling a story to everyone who wants to read it. Watch me live or watch me die. Either way, you're going to learn something. So we try to make choices that are life-oriented, that are committed to a fuller life, a more satisfying life, a more honest life. Effective therapists are authentic, sincere, and honest. Don't hide behind, I'm the counselor, I'm the therapist, I'm the doctor, I'm the teacher. None of that stuff. Who we are in our personal life and our professional work's congruent. I'm not playing a role when I come into work. We also have a sense of humor if we're going to be effective. And a sense of humor is important. We'll talk about that a little bit on and off as we go through here. But a sense of humor is, and one of the problems we have in our country is we have a hard time laughing at ourselves. Right now, particularly Americans are taking themselves way down seriously. Humor is is a bloody business. If you tell a joke, there's always a butt of it. There's always someone who gets it in the end, so to speak, who is a punchline or what have you. So you have to be careful with humor. Laughing with a client's okay, or laughing at your own foibles are okay. But if your clients get the idea that you're laughing at them or making fun of them, that's not so okay. And then you'll have a problem from that point, you know. Effective therapists make mistakes and they're willing to admit them. Now this isn't on the PowerPoint, so if you're going to be studying, you need to go into your book, and it's on pages 19 and 20 where you find this list. But effective therapists make mistakes and they're willing to admit them. We can dismiss some of our errors lightly, but, we make mistakes every day. Every day we make mistakes. We should practice admitting them, that I erred, or I didn't understand that, or I goofed, or whatever. It's not nearly, even though that, can, for a lot of us, feels like we're losing something, losing a sense of self or respect or whatever, through that admission, through an apology to someone saying, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. But it's not nearly as grave a loss as the one that you'll experience trying to play something off like it was their fault and not yours. Effective therapists live in the present, generally. The past is something that we can visit, and hopefully it'll be a nice visit, and we won't try to spend all of our time there. But if you go into your past with the idea of you're somehow going to change it, now we got a problem, because you don't go in and change the past. You don't uneat yesterday's breakfast. It's gone. It's over, done with, So really, being in the present, being present-oriented is extremely important, because that's where you live and where you're making decisions and where you're dealing with consequences and all that kind of good stuff. If you're fixated on the past, or if you're fixated on the future, then you're probably shortchanging yourself in the now. Effective therapists appreciate the influence of culture. You have to. If you look at me and you don't see a gracefully aging old Southern white guy, then you're not seeing me, because that's who I am. But I might also caution you, that's not all that I am. If you run across me in a meeting sometime and I say, hi, I'm Howard, I'm an alcoholic, then you can take that to the bank. That's the truth. I am Howard and I'm an alcoholic. And I may talk about an experience right then and there because I'm an alcoholic, but that's not all that I am. And all that I am is grounded a lot in the culture that I come from, the way I was raised, the values that my parents taught me, that I learned in school and in church, how I feel about changes going on in my society, etc. A lot of those are rooted in culture. And we hear a lot about culture and about multiculturalism and things like that. I believe that most of the people who are taking this course are sitting in the greater Houston area, which is part of our service area. Excuse me. I'm getting a little bit sleepy, but that probably you're sitting there, and if you're sitting in the greater Houston area, then you know this to be true. We're in one of the most multicultural places in the country, and I'm in Seabrook. That's where I'm recording this. I can get my car, and in 15 minutes I can be down at one of my favorite restaurants where most of the people in there are speaking either Arabic or Russian or Ukrainian. dialect. Over 50% of the homes in the greater Houston area speak a language other than English. And that's not just Spanish, kiddos. We have people here who speak all kinds of language because they come from all sorts of cultures and countries. And the idea that, we'll be interacting with people who come from different cultures than ours, than the ones that we're reared in and have experiences in, that's not a foreign or outrageous idea, especially here. Houston is one of the places that has more Garifuna people than any other. Any places outside of Honduras. And the other two places in the United States are New York and Los Angeles. Garifuna are black Arawaks from the Caribbean. They're descended of West African slaves who escaped to the islands and married the Arawak Indians. So they have their own culture. They're here. There are more Nigerians here than any place outside of Nigeria. We have we just have tons of different cultures here, and it's a lot of fun to experience those different cultures, and it's very interesting as well. If you are intimidated by the foreign, intimidated by people who dress, eat, speak, or whatever differently than you do, then it could be a kind of a hellish experience. But it doesn't have to be. So conditioning yourself to be sensitive and accepting of people who come from different social classes, races, sexual orientations, gender identities, etc., is important. We'll talk about cultural humility a little later on, but that's important. Effective therapists have a sincere interest in the welfare of others. Notice that he's not saying that, are able to fake a sincere interest in the welfare of others, but you have it. Rogers speaks a lot of this in his approach to counseling. He calls it unconditional positive regard. Human beings have a value, period. Human beings have a value, and because they're alive, they have a value. If you recognize this, then your interest in the welfare of others should increase. Effective therapists possess effective interpersonal skills. We're able to enter into the world of others without getting lost. This is called empathy, by the way, being able to put yourself into a client's subjective reality without making it your reality, without getting lost in it. And then communicating that understanding back to the client has great therapeutic benefit in and of itself as a counseling technique. But we have good interpersonal skills. If you're talking to someone who's misunderstanding everything that you say or is interjecting your narrative to try to give you advice about how to fix yourself, chances are pretty good you don't want to talk to them long. So how to listen, how to respond, what to say, etc., and so forth, we can give you some guidelines on that. And you will, of course, develop your own unique and personal style of interaction, but your interpersonal communication skills should still be very good. Effective therapists become deeply involved in their work, and they derive meaning from it, and that's good. What's bad is if you're a recovering person, say, for instance, and you stop doing the things that got you sober and are keeping you sober and throw everything into your job, and now you're getting a therapeutic fix out of the work that you're doing. That's not good. Taking these counseling courses or going to work in the counseling field is a poor substitute for treatment if you need treatment. Treatment's what you should be getting. You can accept the rewards coming from your work, but you don't want to become a slave to it. You don't want to make it your reason for being and your all and everything. Effective therapists aren't passionate. Yes, we are, but I'm talking about the courage to pursue the dreams and passions and radiate a sense of change, a sense of energy. Oh, we can be passionate other ways too, but that's the main thing. Oops, did I finish with that? I think I did. Nope. Effective therapists are able to maintain healthy boundaries. We'll talk about this in the ethics presentation that will be forthcoming here before too long. But our clients, and I want to, emphasize this, our clients are not the ones who are expected to set boundaries in the counseling relationship. We are. And we're the ones who are charged with setting those boundaries and maintaining those boundaries. And it's extremely important for us to do that. We're also going to teach the clients how to set boundaries and when they should set boundaries, because sometimes they have none. They enter into relationships with people and into relationships of certain types that they never should be into, and they get hurt behind them. And we don't want to be a part of that, do we? No, of course not. So let me close this out. That too. There we are. So back to where were we? Over here? Yeah. Current side. Which brings us to values. Values shape us. Values come from our culture. Values do not originate in a vacuum. We are our values. They are core beliefs that direct our lives. Everyone has them. They're not the same. And we have to avoid an imposition of values in counseling. You'll learn some things through culture. You'll learn something about values and the way different people look at life and how they look at life. And it can be very exciting to encounter this and to see the differences in the way people view their worlds and things. And sometimes it's shocking too. I had a little Mexican-American boy who was, I say he was a little Mexican-American boy. He wasn't. He was actually grown up. He was around 19. Anyway, he was sent to me by the court system. I was seeing him. He was on probation. He was busted for burglary and things. But he came in one day, and boy, was he ever pissed. And he said, man, I said, well, what are you angry about? And he said, somebody broke into my goddamn car and stole my camera, man. I said, well, what happened? He said, he said, I went to see my parole officer and my probation officer, and I was in a hurry, and I didn't put my camera away. I had a Nikon, a nice Nikon camera, and it was laying on the front seat. And I went to see my probation officer, and when I come back, the window was broken out of my car, my side window, driver's side window, and someone had broke it out and reached in and stole my camera. And I said, man, that would have made me mad too. He said, yeah, I can't believe I did that. And he said, I was just stupid. I said, what do you mean? You're mad at you? And he said, yes, I'm mad at me. because I left my camera out. And if I leave my camera out, that's just, I might as well put a sign up, that said, steal this camera, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm not trying to quote him directly. But this was the gist of the conversation. And I said, well, Freddie, it's not your fault that this guy broke your window in and stole your camera. He said, it goddamn sure is my fault. I left it laying out. And if I hadn't left it laying out, he wouldn't have seen it, and he wouldn't have knocked my window out, and he wouldn't have stolen it. And I said, yeah, but Freddie, doesn't he have some kind of blame here? I mean, isn't he doesn't he have some responsibility? You wouldn't do that, would you? He said, hell yes, I'd do that. If someone left their camera out and on the front seat of their car, I'd take it too. If it's your stuff, it's your responsibility to take care of it. This, dear hearts, is a value. This is a core belief. It directs our lives. I mentioned Carney Mary that opened the first halfway house for women in Houston in the last lecture. She said that if a guy ever showed her $1, he was giving her permission to take it. It's his fault that he's been victimized. It's Freddie's fault that he was victimized. He left his camera out. It's your fault if you leave your door unlocked and someone comes in and robs, rapes, or murders you. It's your fault. You should know better than that, right? Values are not the same for everyone. We have different ones. And one of the things that we need to be careful with when we're working as counselors is to avoid making assumptions about people's values. We need to learn about them, but it's not wise for us to assume that they hold the same values that we hold. Again, about theft. Yours truly was in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting in Baytown some years ago. And if I've got any 12-steppers out there, I know that you know what I'm talking about. When people don't have anything else to talk about at a 12-step club, they'll say, let's have a gratitude meeting, right? And so that's what broke out. And a young man was there who said, and I'll try to be as correct on target as I can remember it, said something along the lines of, I'm very grateful for this program. That's what I'm grateful for, because coming here to these meetings, I've learned things. I've learned things about myself, and I've learned how to think things through. Like the other day, I was going to work, and I got a real crummy job. I work in the draining water out of ditches for plumbers and stuff. I put these drains and drive them down in the mud and drag hoses so that the water will run out of there so that the people can get in there and do what they're doing. And the pay's lousy, and it's wet, and it's nasty, and it's cold, and I hate it, but I have to have a job. So one day I'm walking to work, and it's raining, and I know that there's going to be a lot of mud in those ditches and things, and what I'm going to have to be doing. And it's already drizzling on me, and I don't have a car, so I'm walking to work. And as I pass this convenience store on the right, I see a bicycle, and it's just leaned up against the wall. It's not chained. Nobody's there with it. And I thought to myself immediately, man, if I got that bicycle, I'd be at work in 2 minutes. I could park the bike behind the shed, go in, drink coffee, get warm, and get out of this drizzle. But then I thought, wait a minute. What if someone sees me? They could rat me out. They could drop a dime on me, and they could, call my probation officer and tell them that they saw me stealing a bike. Or maybe a cop would see me and arrest me. Or maybe the owner of the bike would come out and catch me. And I thought it through, and I thought, man, it ain't worth it. It is not worth it for me to take that bicycle to steal that bicycle, because I could get in a lot of trouble and go back to prison over that. And that'd be a stupid reason to go back to prison. And everybody was like, here, yeah, absolutely. And me, I'm sitting kind of in the back thinking, how about it's not your freaking bicycle, dude? How about it's wrong to take stuff that doesn't belong to you? It is wrong and hurtful to steal things. I might want him to think like that, but he doesn't think like that. His values are a little bit different. Now, he might come around to that perspective at some point, but if his thinking's keeping him sober, you know what? I'm okay with it. If his thinking is keeping him from stealing bicycles, I'm okay with it. I'd like to see him get over to a higher level of values, to a higher level of morality, what I consider a higher level of morality. I'm making a value judgment even speaking that way. But what I consider a higher level of morality, more satisfying to me, it may not be something he wants or that he aspires to. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be careful not to be too demanding of our clients and accepting the values that we have. We have to be cognizant of when we're imposing our values on other people and whether it's right or wrong or not. Rogers, the therapist I was talking about earlier, who coined the unconditional positive regard, talks about being accepting and non-judgmental with clients. And that is important to a good, effective counselor. But being, accepting of a person does not necessarily mean I have to accept a behavior. So there will be times when that will come into conflict, and we'll have to discuss that in the counseling. So just be cognizant of the trap that you might fall into when you're making assumptions of what people think are important. Culture is an umbrella term in most usage. Culture can be a lot of things. Be something you do to milk to turn it into buttermilk. It can be a referral to art, literature, etc. of a group of people. It's the norms, it's the laws, it's the customs, it's the habits, it's the religion, etc. of a group or a nation. So culture has a very wide meaning. So what is an American culture? Do you see it anywhere in that in that montage there? Multicultural American culture. You have a Buffalo Soldier here, and a Native American who first called him a Buffalo Soldier. This guy also would refer to him half the time as a black-white man because he didn't make a distinction other than the color. Sikh American, Indigenous American, African American, Irish American, Lithuanian American, left-handed homosexual, prostheticized poet Americans. We have subcultures out the wazoo, and they're divided everywhere. And I'm not saying that facetiously, I'm not saying that disparagingly. I think it's one of the cooler things about being alive right now is being able to encounter all of these different cultures and learning something about them and participating about them. One of the things that you might know, have noticed about me, is that I like to eat. I do, and I'm carrying about 20 pounds too much weight because of that. I would probably die if I had to, just eat one kind of food all the time. I love all the different ethnic foods and try to get into them. I was raised on soul food. I didn't know it was soul food till I went to a soul food restaurant, though. It was just groceries. But it was, Southern poor folk food. And how about that? I like different cultures, languages, musics, customs, things like that to encounter them. And it's kind of exciting to me. Other people see this stuff and they get really intimidated by it. During the last little anti-Muslim rampage that was going on in America, these guys were getting assaulted. They are a subgroup of Hindus. They're called Sikhs. They have absolutely nothing to do with Islam. They're Hindus. But you know, when you got a good anti-Muslim head of steam on, why draw a line? Cultural humility is something that you're going to be hearing about in my class and in other classes as well. And how can you be culturally humble? How should you be culturally humble? Well, it starts with being aware of values and also of biases. You and I have them, kiddos, and it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, color's immaterial, age doesn't matter, gender is, whatever. Whoever we are, however we're put together, whenever we were put together, we still have cultural biases. We just do. And if we're aware of them, we can do something about them. As long as we're unaware of them, we can't. Or even worse, if we have these impulses and deny that we have them, they're not there. There's an old joke. It's not a funny joke, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway, about the bus driver who heard one of the passengers use a racial slur about another person on the bus. And he pulled over to the side of the road and got all the young people off of the bus, and he lined them up alongside in a row between the bus and the ditch, and he walked up and down the line like a drill sergeant, and he said, "Listen here, I'm not having that kind of talk on my bus. You're in the 21st century now. So it's time to leave all of that kind of language, all of that kind of thinking, all of that, everything back behind you." Now, as far as I'm concerned, everyone on my bus is green. You got that? And they're like, "Sir, yes, sir." And he said, "Okay, everybody back on the bus. Light green in front, dark green in back." This is a liberal, the liberal racist joke. It's not funny because for a good deal of the early part of my life, black people rode on the back of the bus and they stood up, to give seats to white people because that was the Southern culture. That's the way it was. And I grew up in an integrated a segregated Southern culture. We didn't go to school, blacks and whites together. We didn't eat in the same restaurants. We didn't go to churches together. We didn't mingle much. So the biases that come along, that become a part of you when you're growing up in a culture like that, are deep and wide. And sometimes they're out of our ken of understanding, and we have to go looking for them, and we have to ask ourselves, why do I feel that way? Why do I respond this way? And when I'm doing that, I'm doing the self-examination that helps me to understand my own culture and how that culture influenced my expectations and how there were expectations put on me by that culture and norms that I'm supposed to conform to. To step out of that is to put myself into the other's reality, into the client's reality, And I wish I had $1 for every time a client has told me over the course of the last 35 years or so, you can't understand. You're not fill in the blank. Black, Latino, female, gay, you can't understand because you're not that. I can't understand experientially, of course, because I'm not that. but I can understand what it's like for you by putting aside my preconceived notions and trying to go with you into your reality. And that's empathy. And then when I do understand, I can give it back to you in a way that you understand that I understand. It's good to have empathy, and it's good to have the humility to learn from another person's culture, but it's most effective counseling when I communicate it back to the person that I'm learning from. As I'm doing that, I begin to understand the dynamics of oppression, racism, discrimination, stereotyping, and all of the things that have been damaging to people in our society over the years, and there's been plenty of it. And you can choose not to believe that, and I'll think that's sad, but you can choose not to believe that. Because it is the truth. Cultural humility basically describes a person's willingness to self-reflect about his or her own culture and be willing to learn about the culture of others. And when you learn about the culture of others, a lot of your prejudices fall by the wayside. They have to. Because they're exposed for what they are, prejudices, not reality. Our clients will be more willing to explore with us and teach us about their culture if we're open to the experience. Remember again that we're in a very multicultural area. We're in a multi-ethnic area. We're in a area where all sorts of different cultures, nationalities, religions, etc., are living together, and so our encounters with one another and our opportunities for encounters with one another are plentiful. So if I'm open to that experience, then it's a good thing. If I put these people off to the side, whoever they are, if I set out certain groups as the ones to be afraid of, to not trust, to not interact with, etc., and so forth, then I'm perpetrating a bad act, really. People who come to see us, and I have been rejected because of my gender, my age, my ethnicity. I remember specifically a black lady telling me on our first and only meeting, I don't trust men in general, and I don't trust white men in particular. At least the black guy sees me when he screws me. And I didn't know what exactly to say to that at the time. Counseling, the interaction is mutually transformative. Growth occurs with both participants. If I have someone who's willing to work with me, who's open to that idea, and I can be open with them, then trust tends to develop. I was in this course, I usually get asked, at least when I'm teaching it face-to-face, how do you get a client to trust you? How do you get a client to trust you? And I don't know how to answer that other than to say, be trustworthy. Because trust is a decision. That's what trust is. As someone making a decision, I'm going to take a risk with you. That's what trust is. Trust isn't a guarantee. If there's a guarantee, it's not trust, it's guaranteed, right? It's not necessarily a feeling. There are emotions associated with it, but trust is a decision. And I'm very thankful for a sponsor I had one time who told me, he said, I can see it in your eyes. You don't trust me. He said, but if you don't trust me, trust someone, because you got to stop. You got to stop what you're doing. And in order to do that, you got to trust somebody. If it ain't me, trust someone. And that was very, very good advice from that guy. I trusted him, by the way. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. You know, when I tell you I'm not going to put your business in the street, I don't. When I tell you, that you can trust me in this issue, you can. And that's because I proved myself trustworthy. And your clients might give you a little bit at a time, see what you do with it. And if you are trustworthy, then it's up to them to decide whether they're going to trust you or not. And they will decide whether they'll trust you or not. So, that's the way that works. Some of the cultures here, that we've got people who are refugees from places that have, where, governmental agencies, the police, anything associated with the government is associated with oppression, and it's very, very risky for them. Their experience is you better not level with bureaucrats, because you'll wind up in prison. So they require a lot of patience, and if you put yourself in their position, then you understand the difficulty that they have in investing in someone that they don't know. There are all kinds of issues that are going to bounce up for new counselors, for people who are going into this field. Anxieties, worrying about stuff. I like my students to worry about things like, am I going to be a good counselor? What if I screw someone up? That kind of thing. What worries me is people who never think about that kind of stuff, who are really sure that everything that they do is absolutely correct and they're infallible. Those people worry me. If you have anxieties, that's fine. Will my clients like me? Will they trust me? Will I do a good job? Do I know enough? Am I going to make mistakes? Yes, you are. So I'll put that one to rest for you. But you can survive them. It's okay to feel anxiety. It's not real okay to let anxieties cripple you in your attempts to get better. It's not okay to let anxieties keep you down, because they can be worked through. Being genuine, that's kind of hard to do sometimes. And an interesting thing is, again, contextual, the setting that you're in. Sometimes it's real hard to be genuine in a classroom setting, because you're competing essentially with other students about who's going to do the best job in, leading the group, or who's going to get the best grade. It doesn't have to be that way, but it winds up being that way a lot. People are worried about in class being too genuine with the instructor. What if the instructor doesn't like who I am and he gives me a bad grade? I guess that could happen. I try not to do that, but this creates anxiety. How real can I be with someone? And we have to have boundaries too, so we'll talk about that too. Self-disclosure. And self-disclosure is an issue in counseling. There are places that will tell you when you hire on there, we don't want you self-disclosing. It isn't about you. You don't want you talking about your experiences with the clients. Keep it focused on them. And there are schools of thought that say self-disclosure is a good thing, and there are schools of thought that say self-disclosure is a bad thing. Self-disclosure is anything anyone says about themselves. That's what self-disclosure is, by the way. I have not a real big problem with self-disclosure. I think that self-disclosure can sometimes give you an almost immediate credibility with some client populations that you might otherwise have to work with, to establish for weeks and weeks, if it ever gets established at all. But in self-disclosure does require an idea of decorum, of knowing what you should disclose and how much, and to whom, and so you have to consider imposing limitations on yourself. You're probably not doing it right if you're constantly saying the first thing that pops into your mind. But self-disclosure is a rule of thumb for me is, if the disclosure that I'm going to make, is it for the benefit of the client? Are they going to get something out of it? Is it going to be helpful to the client to help them move forward to accomplish this or whatever? If it's for the benefit of the client, and that's an honest response, then I'm pretty okay with the self-disclosure. But we'll talk about that some more. All of these we'll talk about some more going forward. Giving yourself a break. Don't be so hard on yourself sometimes. I mean, we are our own harshest critics sometimes. And like I said a while ago, it's difficult for us to find humor in our foibles. I just judge myself too harshly. In working with clients, discussing limitations. Clients ask, and students have asked me all kinds of things over the course of the years, medical advice, legal advice, and I have to tell them I'm not a doctor. My best advice to you is, if you're having a medical problem, is go see a medical person. Get a diagnosis, get treated or something. I can point you at a source. I can point you at a resource for legal advice. I can point you at job training opportunities or job placement people and all of these kind of things. But I can't prescribe for you. I'm not going to tell you to stop taking your medications, that kind of thing. I'll point you back over to a physician. I'm not a marriage counselor. I don't deal with sexual issues. I'm not a sex therapist. I don't do these kinds of things. I can't give you religious advice. So there's limitations all over the place to things I can and cannot do. And when they come up, I should acknowledge that. I haven't taught group class in a while, but one of the first things I do in group is I'll have one of the first exercises I do with the group is I will have the members put their feet flat on the floor with their hands in their laps. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Exhale. Repeat that 3 or 4 times. Now open your eyes and just sit here, and you can look at one another, but I don't want you to say anything or make any noise for 5 minutes. Y'all doing that with me? Can't have the TV on in the back. Can't play with the kitty. Can't drum your fingers on the table. Be quiet and just sit there quiet and look at the other people in the group. I've done that for a number of years now. I have never made it 5 minutes. Someone will break the silence. Sometimes they'll be angry with it. Why are we doing this? This is a waste of time. What are you trying to do? Other times it's patting their feet, patting their hands, something. Because silence makes them a little crazy. It's very uncomfortable to sit in a group with strangers and be quiet. When you're getting into the field, when you're learning to be a counselor and everything, I think one of the things that people feel, and I see this with people who've been teaching and counseling and stuff for a long time, but I want to kind of address that with you early. If things get quiet in your group, or in a counseling session, it does not mean you're doing a bad job. Sometimes that silence is aggression. Someone doesn't want to be there. Mom's dragged them in by the ear, and they will be damned and double damned if they're going to talk to you. You silly counselor person, you. And so it's an aggressive type silence. You'll learn to deal with that. Other times people get silent. I have to work with this too as a lecturer. When I'm in with a live audience, I may ask you a question and give to a classroom of students, and you have 7 seconds to answer it, and I move on. I answer it for you. If I'm doing it properly, if I ask a question of a group of people, I let it go quiet if it needs to go quiet, because people sometimes are thinking about it. They're formulating an answer. They're listening to what you last said. They're thinking about what their response will be. Things get silent all the time in a relationship, an interactive relationship, where people stop to self-reflect, the counselor and the client, and it's perfectly okay. In group, someone's always going to break before you do. That's a promise. I'll write that down for you. You can take it out there with gold-plated guarantee, double your money back. Someone will break the silence. So it's not a big deal. And it can become, your friend, really. I will, over the course of these lectures, as you probably already figured out, I'm going to be telling you some stories and anecdotes and things about what's happened in the field. I was terrifically aggravated with a group of court-referred guys that I had when I was working for DAAC down in Deer Park. And I would come in and say, well, let's get the meeting started. Does anyone have anything they want to talk about? And we may even come up with a topic. But there were several guys in there who would just torpedo whatever was going on, and they'd start talking about trucks or the Astros or something like that. And it'd get they were a terrible distraction, and I'd try to pull people back to what to what the topic was, and I was exerting a lot of effort into it, and I was very frustrated because it wasn't working out for me. And so in our staffing, I told my supervisor, I said, these people are making me crazy. I'm such a lousy counselor. I can't keep them on track, And I described what was going on to her. And she said, well, you read the newspaper in your office every day, right? I said, yeah. She said, take it to group with you. I said, what? She said, take it to group with you. And she's a gestaltist. We'll talk about them in about 8 weeks. But, and so when you go in your group and they start talking about the Astros or talking about a truck, turn your back on them and start reading your newspaper. And I said, what's that supposed to do? She said, just do it. Trust me. When they start going off on you, turn your back on them and start reading your newspaper. So I said, okay. And so I went into group, and I started the group sessions about, whatever the topic was that day. And sure as hell, about 4 or 5 minutes into it, one of my guys started talking about the Astros, and his buddy started talking to him about the Astros, and the crosstalk in the group started going on sports. And I just turned my back to him, and there was a table behind me. I put my feet up on the table and opened my newspaper and started reading. and just didn't pay them any attention while they were doing this. And a few minutes later, it got quiet, and everybody shut up. And then a few minutes later, I heard, and I still didn't pay them any attention. And then eventually someone said, "Mr. Bushard, are we doing group tonight?" And I didn't even look at him. I just never turned away from my paper. I said, "That's up to you guys. Let me know when you're ready." You know, and they said, "We're ready." And so we did group. And I carried my newspaper back in with me in those groups forever and a day. And if they ever went off on the tangents and things like that, I turned my back and started looking at my paper. Worked like a charm every time. Dealing with demands. People come in wanting to be fixed, wanting to have answers, want to know exactly what's, they have to do, etc. and so forth. Want a behavioral prescription. They want you. They want me. If you're making me your higher power, you're in a world of trouble. But dealing with demands from clients. I want this. I want that. Here's what you should do. Here's what I want from this. And let me say that clients have a right to want what they want, and they have a right to ask for what they want. But if people are becoming demanding and pushy and aggressive and things like that, then again, we have to learn how to de-escalate those situations and how to set limits with people. You'll be taught that as we go forward. You're going to have plenty opportunity to practice tolerating ambiguity. And ambiguity, when I'm ambiguous, it means I'm of two minds on something. I'm ambivalent. When I'm talking about ambiguity, I'm not clear on something, and that's often because I'm ambivalent, of two minds. I want something and don't want it. I also have learned to communicate indirectly. I hint at what I want. I don't come out and say what I mean, and then that's what ambiguity is. And it grows often out of ambivalence. I want something and I don't want it. It also grows out of not knowing things. If I come in to see you and you say to me, "Howard, why do you drink?" You're probably not going to like the answer that I give you, and it's an honest answer. And the honest answer is, I don't know why I drink. I just gotta, There's a whole bunch of things. And then I might tell you something like, "Man, I like the taste. I can quit any time I want to, Do you think you have a problem? No. There, you're dealing with basically a lack of commitment. I can't commit to the simplest thing. And that can be crazy making particularly for young counselors, people who are just going into the field, because we think that, we got to break through that wall of denial right now today. We can't tolerate this ambiguousness stuff. You've got to understand what's going on with you. You've got to accept the fact that you're chemically dependent. You've got to commit to your sobriety. And quite frankly, guys, that probably isn't happening today. Still more issues that we've got to deal with in our interactions with others. Boundaries. I want to set clear boundaries between me and the client. I don't want the client to be, their reality to be mine. I don't want the last thing I'm thinking about when I'm going to bed at night is how Joe Blow is doing, with his program. Not that I don't care about them, but I do care about them, and I do hope wish them the best and hope they're doing well. But I have to set some boundaries for my health and for the health of my client. It's not healthy for either one of us to get over involved. And to do that, I have to define roles, and that creates more boundaries. Have a sense of humor, but be careful with it. We talked about that before. It's, someone in a group laughing at someone else can be terrifically destructive. It's not always received in a good way. As you go through these courses, you'll become familiar with a guy named Father Joe Martin. I'll show you some of his stuff, and you'll see him see some of his lecture stuff. Dr. Martin died Father Martin died some years ago, and he was a tremendous influence on my sobriety. I've only met him a couple of times. I've attended some of his lectures, but he was instrumental in my recovery, and I told him so, but I don't know if he would have remembered it or whatever. But he talks about humor sometimes, and he said, and was a recovering fellow himself. He said, in these meetings, in AA meetings, we have speaker meetings, and a guy will get up there and he'll tell his story, and he'll talk about all the crazy and weird things that he did while he was drunk, and all the the trouble he got into and adventures he had and stuff like that. And he'll laugh about it, and we'll laugh about it, we fellow travelers out here, because we relate to what's going on with him, and we have a sense of humor about it. But he said, sometimes when we're doing that, we ought to stop and look at his wife and kids sitting back there on the first row. Look at their faces when he's telling, see how humorous they think it is. He said, if we really had any guts, we'd let our wives tell our stories, and then we might not be so quick to laugh at them, So having a sense of humor is good. I like laughing. I hope you do too, but you have to be careful with it. You don't want people to think that that you're laughing at them, or that you're somehow discounting their experiences, making their pain less than it actually is. We need to learn to share responsibility with our clients. You and I shouldn't be working harder on someone's recovery than they're working, but we should commit to working with them, and we share a responsibility. A responsibility that I believe I have to my clients is that I rarely will cut ties with someone who wants to keep coming back. How many chances should I give someone? I don't know. I sure am glad there wasn't a limit put on the times that I could try to sober up, because if I'd have fallen in the bay with all of my chips in my pocket at one time, I'd have gone down like a ship's anchor. But, if a person comes back to me and wants to try again, I'll work with them. But I'll still point out to them what their responsibility is and what mine is, there's things that I expect of them. I have to expect of them, and they should expect of themselves, and sharing that responsibility. Oh, that SOB don't want to get sober. How do you know? If it was easy, they wouldn't even need people like us. If it were something that they could do on their own, why would they come to us and have their insurance company pay us or pay us out of their pocket? That kind of thing. So I don't have a limit. 7 times, maybe 70 times 7. Avoid giving advice. That's advice from Father Martin. I like that. He says that his advice on advice is don't give it unless it's asked for. and then only reluctantly. And we're asked a lot for advice. And you do have to be careful with it. I might say something off the wall, offhanded, and not even think about it when someone asks me something. And they go home and follow my advice. And they have to live with the consequences of that advice. I'm home watching football and eating pizza, you know. So the advice carries a heavy responsibility. And if we are consistently telling people what to do to resolve their problems, it's our responsibility for the outcomes of that. And we're not really being helpful when we do that, when we tell people what to do. So we'll talk about that a lot more. Learn to use techniques before you use them, always cognizant of that scope of practice that we looked at. How would you utilize this to help in the recovery of a substance use disordered individual? And know what you're doing before you do it. And you'll develop your own counseling style, by the way. When I first got into this business, and I was working for DAAC over in Deer Park, mid-'80s, 1985 is when I started with them. Yeah, I'm pretty old. So I was privileged to work with basically clinical students that had been sent over primarily from the University of Houston Clear Lake from their marriage and family counseling program. And I knew some of the instructors there. One of them was my supervisor at DAAC, Siglinda Voicey. But I could tell from looking at, from watching the interns who were leading group and doing counseling sessions there at the center, from the way they behaved and the way they counseled, and even their speech and mannerism, I could tell which instructor they had at the University of Houston because they copied them that closely. I'm not saying that as a critique. I'm saying that eventually, and with practice, your own personality will express itself in your counseling style, and you'll find a way, to make your approach to working with other people uniquely your own. But I'm thinking of Dr. Barbara Herlihy. And a particular girl who crossed her legs like Barbara did, and who would lean forward and even affect the same manner of speaking, the same cadence of speaking as Barbara. It was like she was trying to be a clone. And, that's I've seen that happen, but I'm confident that you'll develop your own counseling style and move beyond that. Don't burn out is another good piece of advice that's given to the aspiring counselor in this chapter. Burnout is basically, it's just exhaustion. You get tired. This is hard work, believe it or not. You think that you go in, sit down, you talk to people, piece of cake, anybody can do it. When you're in a counseling relationship and you're working with someone and providing this particular service, you're having to function on a lot of levels simultaneously. You're having to listen to what they're saying, pay attention to how they're saying it, watch their mannerisms and eye contact and their posture, listen to their voice inflections, all of this stuff. And if you're in a group, you're linking people. And paying attention and following the conversation and having to give feedback and stuff, so that if you do 4 or 5 counseling sessions a day, trust me, you're tired at the end of the day. And sometimes we get burned out because, an example, I was doing a court-referred program, MIP program, minor in possession. And I was getting the same every case I saw was the same. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. I don't have a problem. Yada, yada, yada. Until I was so tired of fighting the same battle over and over, I felt like doing a jig every time someone canceled an appointment. That's burnout. When I start viewing my clients as problems for me to solve, or as taking their behavior personally, that's burnout. When I don't want to see them, that's burnout. When I want to call in sick, that's burnout. And there are things that I can do to recognize when that's happening to me, to see the symptoms coming. And there are behaviors that I can engage in and resources that I can utilize to prevent becoming burned out. What I want to not do is get to the point where burnout has to be treated, and I've seen that too, where people have relapsed behind it, for instance, and that's not good. Conclusion. The most important thing a counselor does: listen, listen, listen. Pay attention to what's being said. That's the most important function that we have. And let the client know that we're listening, and let the client know that we're understanding. And if we're doing that, we're providing a valuable service in itself. If we come out of a session, and I have been in a 50-minute session, and 40 of those minutes have been spent with me talking, it's a bad session. The goal is not to get the client in there to listen to me. The goal is to bring the client in there and for me to listen to him in a directive manner. And that means that my responses are going to help him or her understand, what's being said, what they're saying. Because they're saying the things that they most need to hear, not me. And so I'm kind of holding a mirror up for them. And how high I hold the mirror, and how long you want to look into it, how long you want to look into this is up to you. It's not up to me, But my job is to provide that service for you, so that you can hear and understand, and that you can have the tools to make decisions and to change things if you need to change in your life. And this brings us to the exciting conclusion of chapter 2 in your book. We have one more lecture in basically the intro section of the book, and this will be on ethics, and that will be the first treatment that we do in Module 2. And then after that, we'll start on the theories themselves. And in Module 2, we'll also do the first theory, which is psychoanalysis. And that is that, and I'll see you guys later. If you have questions or comments or anything, feel free to email. Bye.